Avengers Doomsday is going to be one of the most interesting writing case studies I have seen in a very long time. For the past 7 years, Marvel has been stuck in storytelling limbo. Projects were released promising stories, yet no progress was actually being made. Now we find ourselves at Doomsday, and there seems to be very little cohesive wholeness in the Marvel universe. Pieces of the world are scattered really far from each other, with ties pulling them back to one another either weak or non-existent. In other words, holy cow, do the Russos have their work cut out for them. This is one of the most daunting storytelling challenges I've ever seen, and honestly, I am a little nervous to see if the Russos are going to be able to pull this off. If the trailers are anything to go off of, the scope of Doomsday is obscenely ambitious. Not only are we going to bring together the two different Avengers teams, we're also pulling in Wakanda and Namor, the Fantastic Four, Thor, and Steve Rogers, but all of that still isn't enough because now we're also pulling the mutants into this story. Why? We already have so much material in here. I'm not really seeing how this is all going to feel like a united narrative that offers a powerful and artistic story. The Russos have the most insane project they have ever taken on since Infinity War. They need to pull together so many different ideas into one cohesive whole. How on earth are they going to make the plot of this film make sense while weaving an incredible story into this blockbuster dopamine blaster? Well, I don't have a great prediction for the story itself. That, as far as the trailers have been concerned, has been pretty elusive. However, as I have been keeping my eye on Doomsday news, I remembered a specific unit I had in my film analysis class a couple of years ago. A plot structure that could share some insight for how a writer would even approach something this insane. I want to offer you, dear viewer, a deep dive into what I think is a really fascinating plot structure that you could add to your writing and storytelling toolbox. A writing structure that provides a lot of room to tell a very complicated story and to also explore a vast new world. On my channel, I've mostly dissected different types and expressions of themes. That is honestly where I find the most joy in storytelling. I love theme more than anything else, and discussions on how to write more powerful themes is one of my favorite topics ever. I have not really gotten to touch on plot, more specifically different types of plots and plot structures. Now, before we really dive into this, plots can vary as much as stories. Storytellers kind of have a large group of widely accepted different types of plots, but no two stories will ever share the exact same specific plot structure. Sometimes they get very, very close, but if you take a bird's eye view on different basic plot structures, you can learn a lot about the types of stories you enjoy and why you enjoy them. Today, the specific plot structure that I want to discuss is pretty special because it is really hard to pull off. But when you do, it could make a film like Avengers Doomsday work way more effectively than you would guess at first glance. That plot structure is known as an arena film. Now, what is an arena film? Well, I'm not sure if the term arena film is actually what people use for this specific type of story. I tried looking further into it, but the most I could find on arena film was a 1989 movie called Arena, so I'm not sure if my professor came up with the term or if he found it in some particular textbook. But according to my professor, an arena film is a plot structure that takes several different plot strands and weaves them together around one big conflict and climactic moment that doesn't really have a single main character or protagonist. The example that we studied in class was Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. In this movie, Christopher Nolan takes the three different perspectives on the historical event, the soldiers, the civilians, and the Royal Air Force, and weaves those three different groups into a singular story that ends up overlapping in a powerful way in the end. When Christopher Nolan explains it, he talks about the three different lengths of time that he folds in weird ways to make the movie feel like it's all happening at once, but structurally from the plot, he takes three equally weighted storylines and ties them together in a very significant way. Now, some of the strengths of this plot structure is that Christopher Nolan was able to cover three separate situations that had three completely separate characters in a satisfying way. In other words, Christopher Nolan essentially told three different stories, but wove them together in such a way that it felt like he was telling you one complete meaty narrative. Christopher Nolan was able to bounce from three separate locations and have a whole ensemble of characters that all interacted with the same-ish situation very differently. He was able to cover a lot of ground in a very short amount of time because he heavily consolidated the time he needed to explore everything he wanted to. That is the biggest strength of the arena plot structure. You get to explore a lot of your world and conflict without the audience feeling overwhelmed by the amount of content. However, the biggest weakness of that specific plot structure is that if you don't spend the time on it, character growth and development seldom actually happen. Arena films are not built to explore characters and their backstories because we have a lot of plot and world to get through in a very short amount of time. You'll find that one of the biggest critiques of Dunkirk is that while the plot is very impressive, the characters unfortunately are pretty lacking. And we can actually see this in Marvel's own Arena film in the past. While on the surface, all of the Avengers movies look like Arena films, only one of them actually fits the description. Avengers Assemble, Age of Ultron, and Endgame each have one specific storyline that they follow through several different characters. Despite such a big cast, I would argue that the main characters of each of these films is Tony Stark, making those movies structured like your typical team-up narrative. However, Avengers Infinity War is something else entirely. In this film, we have several different storylines all happening at the same time. We cover multiple different locations with a whole slew of characters that are all going through their own conflicts simultaneously. At the end of the movie, each of these storylines converge into one epic finale with major characters from each storyline coming together and wrapping up the singular massive story. Structurally, Avengers Infinity War shares more with Dunkirk than it does any other superhero film, and I think that was on purpose. Like Dunkirk, Avengers Infinity War had to cover a ton of ground. This was the culmination of a whole ensemble of characters, worlds, and arcs that all had to be consolidated into one narrative. One of the unique strengths that Infinity War had, where Dunkirk didn't, was the fact that the character arcs and growth had basically all happened in other movies. We know who Star-Lord is and what drives his character. We know exactly who Tony Stark is and why he feels the way he feels. We have seen Doctor Strange's weird wizard power before and don't really need that explained to us all again. We know the relationship between Spider-Man and Iron Man. We know how Wakanda fits into the world of Marvel. We know that Wanda and Vision are falling in love. We know all of this because it has all been established previously. Therefore, the Russos are cashing in on what we have already seen by supplying only a couple of really quick scenes dedicated to each character before we move on to a different story. The characters that need more focus for the sake of this specific story are given more time, and the characters who are already developed only have a handful of lines. This absolutely works because of the groundwork that had been laid in the other stories in the past. Now, instead of needing a whole ensemble of character-driven stories, Infinity War can focus on the one story and character that it really wants to explore: Thanos. He is the one new element that we haven't seen before, and thus he is the one character that we really want to get to know. Infinity War allows us to dive into Thanos' philosophy for why he believes that killing half of the universe is not only morally just, but completely necessary for the survival of all societies. Thanos sees that trading lives is an entirely justified action if it means more survivability for everyone else. The heroes believe the opposite, and so we can see these two philosophies clash in this great conflict. That is the magic of Infinity War and why it works so well. Because we know these heroes, we already know where they stand on the main thematic question. Thanos is new, so we get several scenes exploring his ideas and philosophy. Now we can have a ton of fun weaving several storylines together for one bombastic ending that leaves the audience at the edge of their seats. So what does all of this mean for Doomsday? Well, from what I could gather from the trailers, Doomsday looks like it has a similar plot setup to Avengers Infinity War. Several different storylines that are all going to converge onto each other for a bombastic ending. However, with the sheer number of new characters that haven't interacted much with the wider Marvel world, I am pretty worried about how well all of these characters are going to be developed and explored. Marvel is at its best when it explores the personal and philosophical limits of these almost mythological characters, and the Russos are not unfamiliar with telling great stories that push our favorite characters further than they ever have been before. I'm worried that because of the sheer amount of new and novelty content, the Russos won't have the room to really explore a powerful and captivating story. They and the audience will be too distracted by all of the familiar and exciting characters finally entering into the MCU to fully dive into the powerful and meaningful story that they want to tell. And this is why I am so worried for Avengers Doomsday. It stands as this great culminating work that has been built up by a studio stuck in storytelling limbo. All of the pieces that have been introduced feel unbelievably distant from each other. These characters are either mildly developed, incredibly well developed because of one great movie, really underdeveloped, or simply feel out of place in this ever-growing, increasingly confusing world. We need a lot more time with these characters, but I'm afraid that Marvel Marvel is going to jump past the character development straight into the spectacle of Doomsday. Additionally, with introducing a whole new cast of characters that we have never seen before in the MCU that will all need some level of development and exploration, what will that mean for our underdeveloped cast? Who will get the time? Will the title Doomsday be a subversion because Doctor Doom isn't actually going to be all that present? That feels like a really big letdown for those who were really hoping for a Doctor Doom-centric conflict. No matter how you seem to look at this project, from a plot that is designed to explore as much as possible to a huge cast of characters that all need growth and development, to requiring watching through hundreds of minutes of other movies just to understand these other characters, Doomsday seems to inevitably be weak in one or two areas of its story, and that has me really nervous for the film's future. I love Marvel, and I really, really like the films that the Russos have worked on. They are a powerful pair of storytellers, and I really want to be excited for what they have to tell in Doomsday. I just can't help but feel really worried for the massively daunting task these two have ahead of them. Maybe Doomsday goes through with an arena film type of plot structure. Maybe it doesn't. Until that film is actually released in December, we really have no way to know how well the Russos pull off their artistic vision. But I did want to take this opportunity to both voice my concerns for the overall MCU, but also explore a plot structure that I think is super cool. If you are a writer who wants to explore a really plot-heavy story, give the arena film structure a shot. Explore your favorite types of stories and spend time to break down how the plots are constructed. As you explore the limitless ways the stories can be told, you will find structures and ideas that you really like, and you will learn how to apply that scaffolding to your own vision. If you really want to get better at storytelling, study stories and learn what they do that makes such a powerful impact on the lives of those who experience them. Marvel has made that impact on me, and I really hope that it will continue to do so for years to come. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you really enjoyed, be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss a future upload. And if you really want to see the story that I am currently working on, be sure to check out my second channel, Chapter 1 Games, for my narrative card game, The Night of Horrors: Darkness Rising. Have a great day.